Hello guys, welcome to my new video, and this video is a little bit different. It's basically a long clip from the Twitch stream that I did a couple of days ago. It's basically an off-the-cuff discussion about healer balance and basically how it changed throughout BFA. So basically looking at certain healers that were really strong and maybe have fallen off, or maybe how did the introduction of Glimmer of Light affected Holy Paladin and the healer balance in Mythic Plus. So this is off-the-cuff, and maybe certain timelines are not 100% accurate, but I feel it still gives a general overview of how the healer balance changed in BFA, and maybe we'll try and look at this video in the future and compare it to how healer balance was different in Shadowlands. So keep in mind that there might be some inaccuracies, but let me know how you feel about this video, and I hope you enjoyed, guys. So here we go. Mistweavers were doing really well. Shamans were absolutely terrible in Uldir. They were terrible, man. Terrible. Like, they were so bad that people didn't want to bring them for Spirit Link. Like, that's how bad they were, man. Like, Shaman for Uldir was like one of the weakest points ever, man. Like, I think I've never seen Shamans drop off that badly. I think Shamans got, like, legitimately, I'm not even kidding, they were probably the most mistreated healers to some extent. They got like 5 buffs throughout the whole expansion or something like that to keep them in the right position. Like, they must have miscalculated Shaman performance so much. So much, man. But at the same point, they became, after all the buffs, they became good. So Shamans were terrible in Uldir. Resto Druids, believe it or not, they were the Trank bots. Resto Druids in Uldir were just Tranquility bots. Their Tranquility was so overpowered. Tranquility got nerfed later down the line, but Tranquility was such a strong HPS cooldown because of the 2-minute inner peace. And I think Vision of Perfection was because of the cooldown reduction that you received with Tranquility. Resto Druids were actually used for some of the World First fights. Even World First, what's the last boss called? Gahun. Because their Tranquility lined up really well with the heavy AoE phase. But Resto Druid was legit a Trank bot. If you messed up your Tranquility, get out of here. Like, most of your healing was coming from Trank. And Blizzard kind of saw this as they were like, okay, we don't want the healer, like majority of their healing coming from one healer cooldown, and we're gonna nerf Trank and we're gonna buff other stuff. And that's what happened over the phase. They were such a weird, man, healer. Like, it's so weird just being all about Trank. And I remember, like, if you mess it up, GG, man. Holy Paladins were bad at that time as well, and not were amazing. They didn't have Glimmer. Maybe if you need a tank healing, you probably bring in Holy Paladin. I was mainly tank healing, man. But the problem with the thing, Holy Paladin's tank healing was outdone by Mistweaver's tank healing. Mistweaver's tank healing during Uldir was insane. Their tank healing was really strong. So you could have a Mistweaver come in, do more tank healing than Holy Paladin, and be way better at AoE healing. So it was like, why would you bring a Holy Paladin to a lot of times? I think Devotion Aura was still really strong. It was one of the main reasons. But it was like, why would you even bring a Holy Paladin when you had a Mistweaver type of deal? The best healer by far for Uldir was Discipline Priest. You can't see it here properly because they made the changes for the thing. Discipline Priest up to Mythic mid-tracks. So up to mid-tracks, this is insane. This is the second last boss on Mythic. Up to mid-tracks, and Blizzard didn't see this. I don't know why they didn't do it. Discipline Priests were doing like 20% or 15% more healing than any other healer. They were so boosted, it was absolute. You would see mid-track, Zul, all of those fights. You would see whole Discipline Priest 15-20% more healing than any other healer. And this was going on until the very second boss, until the very last boss. Then they received a big nerf, man. Around that time, they received a big nerf. And they were still really strong. But Discipline Priest was like insanely overpowered. Mistweavers were super strong. We're replacing Holy Paladins. Mistweavers were super strong. We're replacing Holy Paladins. Resto Druids were Tranquility bots. Resto Shamans were in a really poor state that no one was bringing them, even with the Spirit Link. Then they got massive buffs. Resto Druid Tranquility got nerfed. Everything else got increased.
Holy Paladin, like, you know, did not have Glimmer and was mainly there for tanking and Devotion Aura. Discipline Priest was absolutely overpowered, got a huge nerf, but still was strong. Honestly, can't remember Holy Priest, probably was never brought in progression rating anyways, just the way the Holy Priest usually works. And then we went into, where is it? We went to Battle of Dazar'alor. Battle of Dazar'alor. So I was still playing my Mistweaver here. Mistweaver was still being strong. They still had that niche of, you know, statue, single target healing, AoE healing. They still brought in that 5% physical buff. Resto Druid was stepping away from Tranquility bot role and was doing more thing, but it was still no utility, not a lot of utility to the thing. Discipline Priest was always passive DPS, barrier, still very strong. This is when Holy Paladin, halfway through this, people were like, hey, have you seen this Glimmer shit going on? Dude, if you get 3 Glimmers and you like go full, you go like Holy Avenger Wings, you go a lot of haste and stuff like that, you can really like, dude, you can, people were even using, there was a trinket. People were memeing with this even, man. There was a trinket in Battle of Dazar'alor that gives you strength. That's the one. People were even memeing with this trinket as Holy Paladins. It increases your haste by a certain amount of speed. They didn't care about the loss of intellect. Because back then, you didn't have the Glimmer cap. So like it was a lot of memeing shit going on. Because intellect had such a little value for Holy Paladins. Because you had no cap on Glimmer. The more Glimmers you get out meant haste was insanely strong. So people were like, dude, like halfway through Battle of Dazar'alor, I want to say, people were like, dude, this build could have some value to it. Resto Shaman was the biggest winner in Battle of Dazar'alor. Even though you can see their HPS is whatever, they were the biggest winner because the last 2 bosses, or the last couple of bosses, were extremely good for stacking, and Spirit Link was really, really strong for things like... And Battle Rest Totem. Battle Rest Totem was really strong for Mythic Jaina. Resto Shaman was the biggest winner of Battle of Dazar'alor. From one of the weakest healers in Uldir, they came in and became one of the strongest healers. And Holy Paladin was just emerging. So there was a fun thing emerging that was happening, that all of the Resto Shamans in Uldir re-rolled, or majority of them re-rolled to something else. And when BOD came out and they were like, hey, Jaina is like super, super good fight for Resto Shaman, there was a lack of Resto Shamans. I remember seeing that people were recruiting for Resto Shamans like crazy for the last 2 bosses. And they were recruiting and they couldn't find the Resto Shamans because all of them re-rolled because they were so bad in Uldir. And it was a funny thing happening with it. I ended up transferring my Resto Shaman from the Horde side, gearing him up for Jaina, because Battle Rest Totem was so strong, Spirit Link was so strong, there was so much stacked healing. It was insanely good. So Resto Shamans were emerging. Mistweavers, technically Mistweavers were still very strong, but it was slowly becoming the downfall of Mistweaver. So after Battle, this is like a history class, dude. This is history class. After BOD, I don't really want to talk about Crucible that much because I don't feel Crucible. Do people feel Crucible is worth even talking about at this point? Like, I don't know. Because it was only 2 bosses and both of the bosses were extremely hard. Like, they were so hard, man. So we'll just go to Eternal Palace. So Eternal Palace is pretty recent, so I think a lot of people might know what happened in Eternal Palace and things like that. So if you look at the healing, we generally look at 75 percentile. We generally look at 75 percentile, and this is for 8.2. So this is when Glimmer came about. This is when Glimmer was fully thought out. It emerged in BOD. Halfway through BOD, people were like I told you, haste, no cap. Dude, Holy Paladin, Glimmer build, get everything into this. This is gonna be good. And Glimmer Paladin popped off, man. There was no cap. You could pre-heal. You could all of a sudden you might have become a preemptive healer, like almost like a discipline priest sometimes, like applying glimmers on people who are full HP. When damage happens, you press Holy Shock on somebody, and you have tons of glimmers on everybody, and they all get healed. Like, it was an insane time to be a Holy Paladin. It was an insane time to be a Holy Paladin. They had passive DPS because of Glimmer, because of the Crusader Strike, because of the Crusader Might Talent. Devotion Aura was super strong. The only problem with Devotion Aura was that Zakul, there was a bug with Zakul with 2 Holy Paladins using Devo Aura, and it wasn't reducing damage in the same way. It was something weird going on with it on that specific boss. So if you had 2 Holy Paladins on Zakul, you would have 1 Holy Paladin swap to Aura of Sacrifice, and they would bubble when they were using it so they wouldn't die, because Aura of Sacrifice would redirect damage to you, as part of it. So that was the only issue with stacking Holy Paladins. But this was the thing, man. Again, Holy Priest is being shown as a lot of healing, but this is such a misinterpretation of the strength of Holy Priest. Discipline was far more valuable than Holy Priest in many different ways. And this is every time I look at these meters, is Holy Priest is like top HPS. But when you look at progression rating, Holy Priest is very rarely being included in those kills. Discipline Priest, you might be looking at it and be like, oh man, Discipline wasn't all that good. Discipline Priest was very close, first or second. Like, Holy Paladin was emerging, definitely, but Discipline Priest was still very, very strong. And the reason why Discipline Priest was so strong during this time, though, is because Eternal Palace damage patterns were very suited to Discipline Priest. There was a lot of no damage, no damage, no one's losing any HP, everyone's 50% HP. Discipline Priest was the burst, and then there's no damage happening at all. It was like burst type of patterns that fit Discipline Priest, Schism, what is that ability called that extends everyone atonements? Just fit their burst patterns so well. And Discipline Priest was doing really, really well. You also have to remember that Discipline Priest was really strong those times. Evangelism. Discipline Priest was really strong those times because also their DPS, Schism increased the DPS of their essences like Crucible. Discipline Priest was solid. Like, they did so much damage as well. Because Schism, the DPS ability that would increase the damage, would also increase all of their essences and all the things. And trinkets and essence and stuff like that. And that got changed later on. So their DPS suffered a lot with the later change. But right now, in Eternal Palace, you have Holy Paladin, Glimmer, an emerging build that happened halfway through BOD. Then Discipline Priest is still super solid. Their DPS is insane. Barrier is still super strong. Damage patterns of Eternal Palace worked so well for Discipline Priest. They are by far, like, Holy Paladin and Discipline was like literally the thing. This was that thing, man. This was that thing for majority of the content. Holy Paladin and Discipline Priest was insane, man, for a lot of the stuff. A lot of the stuff. Mistweaver, this is where you had the downfall of Mistweaver, man. Just Mistweaver, just like, people were like, why would I bring a Mistweaver when I can bring a Holy Paladin? Why would I even bother with Mistweaver? What's the point? To the same extent, Resto Druid. Why would I bother with Resto Druid when I can bring a Holy Paladin? Passive DPS, damage reduction, same with Discipline Priest. What is even the point of bringing these 2 healers? Resto Shaman still, I think, from what I remember, Resto Shaman still had uses, but it wasn't all that crazy popular. It wasn't, I guess it was, when I actually think about it. Even though Zakul was like one of the worst fights, when you think about it, Zakul, everyone spread, a lot of spreading and things like that. Resto Shaman was still very popular for the last couple of bosses, because of things like Spirit Link. Now, I should have to mention, like I skipped over this, Resto Shaman, Battle Shaman spec. So how many people remember the Battle Shaman in raids? Battle Shaman was still kind of prevalent, or was still kind of a thing in Eternal Palace with Ignis potential, but Battle Shaman was huge in Crucible of Storms. Was huge. A lot of people were running Battle Shaman in those days. That was like the big, if you enjoyed Battle Shaman and DPSing as a Shaman, Crucible of Storms was when Shaman was really popping off, or Battle Shaman was popping off. In Eternal Palace, I still want to say that Battle Shaman was a thing, but I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% on how many bosses was really that popular for Battle Shaman to come in, but it was still a solid. So it was Holy Paladin, Discipline Priest, and probably Resto Shaman still making headway in Eternal Palace. Mistweaver was falling off. Resto Druid used to be a Tranquility bot, received a nerf. Strength wasn't as strong before. Blizzard was trying to fix Resto Druids in Mythic Plus. They were trying to nerf them. There was a change. That's gonna nerf them Mastery. Then it got reverted. Then it got put in. Like Blizzard was like really kind of in panic about what do we do about Resto Druids in Mythic Plus. They're dominating Mythic Plus like insane, but in raids they're not all that hot. What's going on? How do we do it? They were kind of panicking at this stage. Mistweaver, again, they were like, Mistweaver was good in Mythic Plus, but in raids they're not doing all that good. Let's think about making some changes, and they did. In 8.3, they made fist sweeping. For the people who remember, Ny'alotha comes around, and I think a lot of people knows this. A lot of people seen this and things like that. Ny'alotha comes about. We're talking mainly like world progression and things like that, world first progression. And we can look at 75. This is the healing right now. We look at the healing 75%. Again, this is the most recent Ny'alotha. By battle shaman, I mean flame shock, ignis potential shaman that you would DPS for majority of the fight, and then you would heal when needed. So you would try to DPS as much, and it worked. It worked to be a battle shaman because a lot of the times people might even go Ascendance because they have a lot of burst cooldowns like Spirit Link and things like that, and they might go Ascendance and Cloud Burst and things. So they would provide burst healing when needed because the damage or the boss fight would require burst healing. And that was really strong in Crucible of Storms. I remember so many battle shamans at those times. It was insane. So Ny'alotha comes out. Blizzard looks at things like, hey, Holy Paladin Glimmer build in Eternal Palace is making us look like a joke. Like, this is insane. People are memeing about how passive DPS is super strong. People are memeing about how Glimmer is strong. And Blizzard is like, we're gonna make a cap of 8 for Glimmer. And this is gonna solve everything. This is gonna solve everything. This is gonna fix all of the issues that made Holy Paladin super strong. And of course it didn't. It just made the preemptive style of, in Eternal Palace, people would sometimes, Holy Paladins would go insane haste, and they would apply glimmers on people that were full HP. And when Ny'alotha happened with the 8 glimmer cap, what changed was that you would rather do effective healing on a person, let's say has 50% HP and has glimmer on them, and then there's another person that has no glimmer on them but is like 90% HP. You would rather use your Holy Shock on the person that actually needs the healing even though they have glimmer, just to do the effective healing because of the 8 cap. So the playstyle changed. It was far more whack-a-mole. Let the person lose HP. Don't get me wrong, you still want to have those 8 glimmers out and things like that. But it was far more like, I want to do effective healing rather than spread my glimmers. So Holy Paladins was still extremely strong. Passive DPS, damage reduction is still there. Glimmer, of course. Like, you don't realize how boosted they were in Eternal Palace, Holy Paladins. Like, they were so boosted with Discipline Priest. They were so boosted. People don't actually realize how bad of a design or balance or class balance it was in Eternal Palace with Holy Paladin and Discipline Priest. People, like, if it was real life, if this was a real life thing, people would be boycotting outside. They were like, what are you doing? Holy Paladin, Discipline Priest is like so insanely strong. Like, please change this. And they tried to nerf it, but they were still super strong. Same with Discipline Priest. They were nerfing Discipline Priest. They were nerfing the damage that they were doing because Schism wasn't being affected by essences. And because Discipline Priest has fallen down a bit because it was still very strong. So in Eternal Palace, 2 Holy Paladins, 2 Discipline Priests was like super strong meta. In Ny'alotha, 2 Holy Paladins, 1 Discipline Priest, 1 Resto Shaman became the meta. The reason why a lot of people didn't take 2 Discipline Priests is a lot of the times was that the damage patterns were not as, like, in Eternal Palace, for Discipline Priest, the damage patterns was heaven. It was just heaven. There was a lot of burst healing. It just fit their playstyle so much, their cooldowns, evangelism, everything. In Eternal Palace or Ny'alotha, it was a bit different. It was a bit different, and they were definitely not as strong. The nerfs were felt to some extent. The nerfs were definitely felt. So Holy Paladin was still one of the kings. Discipline Priest was still extremely strong raid healer, but was definitely not as strong as it was in Eternal Palace. Eternal Palace was Discipline Priest heyday. Oh no, actually, Uldir was Discipline Priest heyday. So Discipline Priest was the strongest in Uldir, and then Eternal Palace, and then Ny'alotha, in my opinion. So then you had Holy Priest. Holy Priest was actually pretty decent in Ny'alotha. There was a lot of World First bosses or guilds that brought Holy Priests because they were like, I don't care about the damage past the DPS. There's a lot of healing needed. We're going to bring Holy Priest. Holy Priest has one of the strongest HPS cooldowns. We're going to bring them, and they're going to do really well. And they did that for a couple of fights. Not the later fights, but they did that for a couple of fights. They absolutely did it. Resto Druid in the same spot. Why did we bring Resto Druid? Just pure HPS. No real utility. Same with Mistweaver. Why would we bring Resto Druid and Mistweaver? They don't really provide anything in terms of damage. They need to like go full down. They need to make a decision of going damage or healing. They don't have passive DPS like Holy Paladin, Discipline Priest. They don't have good damage reduction cooldowns. They just don't have. There's just no real need for Resto Druid and Mistweaver. Just like in Eternal Palace. And that trend continued. It's like Blizzard was like, hey, Resto Druid is really good in Mythic Plus. And they were trying to fix it by nerfing them in Mythic Plus. Actually, wasn't Ny'alotha... That's also another thing. I think Resto Druid Ny'alotha was one of the worst times for Resto Druid. Resto Druid Ny'alotha was the worst times. You know why? Because I just remembered. Blizzard nerfed Resto Druid Mastery and Sunfire Azeroth trait damage before 8.3 or during 8.3. And of course, that was a huge hit for Resto Druids in Mythic Plus, but they're still very strong. But that also affected them in raids. So not only Resto Druid was already a poor utility healer in raids, but they also have to pay for the price for being so strong in Mythic Plus in raids. I know it wasn't that big of a hit, the Mastery nerf, but it was still a hit. So all of a sudden, Resto Druid was not only one of the weakest raid healers because of their utility. When I say weakest raid healers, I'm not looking at HPS, I'm looking at everything. Was not only one of the weakest raid healers, but they also got nerfed. Man. It was insane. And the same with Mistweaver. But with Nile, they didn't get nerfed, but Mistweaver was also not a really wanted healer. But during 8.3, remember when I said that Eternal Palace, they looked at Eternal Palace and they were like, hey, Holy Paladin is doing too good, we're gonna nerf them. Hey, Discipline Priest is doing too good, we're gonna nerf them. They didn't really do a whole lot. They were like, okay, they looked at Resto Druid, and I think they did some changes. I think they reduced like the mana cost of Efflorescence or Rejuvenation or something like that, something small that only would affect them in raids. They did changes like that, but didn't really change anything. Mistweaver, they were like, okay, let's try bring Fist Weaving. That's the big thing that they did for 8.3. They tried to bring in Fist Weaving. And Fist Weaving at the start, from what I remember, it didn't really... First of all, there was not a lot of Mistweavers in World First races. And Fist Weaving only really became overpowered when people realized that you could reach a certain point of haste. And you could keep enveloping mist on everybody. You could keep... once people realized that, Fist Weaving became OP. But that was way too late. World First race was over by ages. Mistweaver was progression was done. So Mistweaver was only overpowered for like a couple of weeks or a month or something after progression was over, and then it got nerfed. And then it went back to Upwelling build, which is what it is right now. But generally speaking, for Ny'alotha, Resto Shamans in Ny'alotha was probably... So Resto Shaman was super strong in BOD. The last couple of bosses, Balrest Totem was really, really, really strong for Jaina. And then Ny'alotha, Resto Shamans were really strong. If I were to talk about the heyday of Resto Shaman in BFA, BOD definitely comes up. Ny'alotha definitely comes up. Ny'alotha was one of the strongest points for Resto Shaman because, first of all, the first time, there was a lot of stacked fights. You know there was a lot of stacked fights. Like, it was insane the amount of stacked fights that there were. Spirit Link was really strong. They were generally super strong HPS healers. Like the meta was definitely 2 Holy Paladins, 1 Discipline Priest, and 1 Resto Shaman. And that followed for a lot of top end guilds. If I look at the worst times for Resto Shamans, Uldir was insanely bad. Halfway through Uldir was just insanely bad. They were so low in HPS, so undertuned as Resto Shamans in Uldir, that people were not even bringing them for the Spirit Link. And then Resto Shaman legitimately had to go through like, I don't know, 5 or 6 buffs before they actually became wanted in raids. Like, it was insane. And Mistweaver started off so strong in Uldir and just withered away. Which hopefully is not going to happen in Shadowlands. Because I honestly feel like Mistweaver's scaling, the way that their mastery works, the fact that not every heal is affected by mastery, is really like, that needs to change. Holy Paladin, honestly, I thought at the start of BFA that they destroyed Holy Paladin. I thought Legion Holy Paladin was really, really nice. I really liked Order of Sacrifice. Was one of the nicest healing cooldown abilities that a healer had that was somewhat skill based. Believe me, there's a lot of healer cooldowns that are just press a button and that's it. Order of Sacrifice in Legion actually required you to effectively heal, and it would splash across the raid. So if you didn't actually effectively heal anybody, you would do like no healing. And I was like, damn, this is gonna be great if that's gonna be in BFA. They removed that, they removed all of the things. And I was like, BFA, Holy Paladin is destroyed. I dropped it instantly. Uldir comes out. Holy Paladins were still pretty decent. I wanna say okay-ish. They were still used as like tank healers, but again, in Uldir, the meta was like, if you need a tank healer, you could bring a Mistweaver. Like a Mistweaver tank healing was really, and I'm talking about really, really strong in Uldir. They were the tank healers in Uldir. They replaced Holy Paladins as the tank healers because the statue and the strong single target. Mistweavers just tend to do really well at the start of the expansion. And then Glimmer came in and then destroyed everything. Discipline Priest was pretty much always strong. The heyday was definitely Uldir. They were about 20% ahead of everybody else. They got nerfed. They were still extremely strong for the rest of the tier. And Holy Priest, again, the whole expansion was kind of a meme progression healer. One of the best HPS healers, but they were lacking in every other department. So much similar. Like, the thing is, it's better to be a Holy Priest and be one of the best HPS healers than be like a Resto, Druid, and Mistweaver with Upwelling and not even be the best in that department. Like, when you really think about Holy Priest, Resto, Druid, and Mistweaver in BFA, I don't talk about Upwelling build. Their department was HPS. They don't really provide passive DPS. They don't have damage reduction. So if you were to bring them in raids, it would be purely their healing potential. At least Holy Priest was top at that. Do you know what I mean? Keep in mind, Resto Druid, keep in mind, Mistweaver was still very strong at the start, and their single target was really strong. And Resto Druid in Uldir, they were Tranquility bots. And their Trank was really strong and definitely found the niche on things like the last boss in Uldir. I can't remember the Worm. There were Resto Druids in World First fights included in that because with Inner Peace and stuff like that, their Tranquility was really strong. So basically, this was like, I don't know why I spent so much time on this, but this was basically, and I'm sure there's a lot of things. I just did this off the cuff on the stream. Look at all the healers throughout BFA. I'm sure there's a lot of things that I maybe missed, like the nerfs happening to certain healers at specific patches. Maybe I messed up certain patch dates and things like that. But I feel this is general consensus of what the healers were like for World First progression. And a lot of the times when you see these charts, you're like, hey, why would you say Holy Priest is bad? They're like one of the top HPS healers. HPS in World First fights is definitely not the defining factor of what makes a healer good. And I wish I could show it to you, but right now the data is really kind of messed up. I wish I could show it to you like, I don't really have the things here. I wish I could show it to you how many like Holy Priests were included in the World First or in the last bosses for things like N'Zoth and Carapace and stuff like that. I would like to show you, or like for nearly every single patch. Holy Priest might be dominating HPS, but their inclusion in raids for the hard bosses is very poor. It's very, very poor. So this was like an overview of how the healers were performing. We'll see how this is gonna compare in Shadowlands. We'll see when I do a video like this in a year or two or something like that, to see how it's changed, to see if damage, passive DPS and damage reduction, are they still the kings of, or what makes a healer good?